Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the inaugural Nonprofit Dreaming and our session, Custom Metadata Types, Nonprofits and You with the incredible Sarah Pilzer. My name is Laura Hope Kimberly. I'm the fundraising and engagement lead at Exponent Partners, which is a mission-based consulting firm and a Salesforce.org premium partner. And before I begin, I want to say a huge thank you to our incredible sponsors. Without their support, this event would not have been possible. Thank you very much. And without further ado, here is Sarah.
Thanks, Lara. That was so glad to be here. Welcome, everybody. Happy day 2 of Nonprofit Dreaming. Before we dive into today's content, I just wanted to give a brief introduction for myself. I am a platform champion, a trailhead ranger, recent Golden Hoodie recipient, and certified admin. And for my day job, I work as the Director of Operations for the Country Dance and Song Society. We are a participatory arts nonprofit that builds community through traditional folk music, dance, and song. And we've been using Salesforce for about 5 years now to do basically everything in our back office, from donor management to program registrations. And I'm going to show you today a little bit about how you can use custom metadata types to achieve some of these nonprofit business use cases. So I have 3 goals for today's session. The first is to give you a little bit of information about what custom metadata types are and why you might use them. Show you exactly how to set them up in the back end of Salesforce, and then how you can use them in your business process automations in order to really capitalize on their value. So let's dive right into what are custom metadata types, because it's an awfully technical sounding term, but is it, you might be asking yourself, is this really something that I can hope to understand as an admin and not a developer? So let's start by demystifying the phrase with a few definitions. The first, metadata. What is metadata? All it is, very simply put, is a set of data that describes and gives information about other data. So meta, data, data about data. And examples of this in Salesforce are things as simple as the names and labels that you give to fields, such as first name, total amount, the actual type of that data, so whether it's text, date, currency, the business processes, the automations you build, process builder, flow, any of that, all of that information that structures though, that's metadata, as well as even the layouts and record pages that you design. All of this information that structures Salesforce so that you can put in your record information, all of that is metadata. Okay, so what about the custom part? What does custom mean in this case? Well, as we all know, you have, let's say this gray box here represents a standard object in Salesforce. Well, you can customize those using things like custom fields. You can start to change the shape of standard objects. Or if you want, you can go for a custom object. Let's say this blue hourglass shape is a custom object you've created. Well, a custom metadata type is basically just a really glorified custom object. And you can make it any shape you want it to be. So in addition to just using the predefined metadata that comes in Salesforce, things like a name field, an address field, or even the custom fields, you can start to dig in and create objects that look exactly like what you need them to be and to hold the kinds of data that you want to hold. And of course, there's other kinds of customizations in Salesforce. You might be familiar with custom labels and custom settings. So why might you choose custom metadata over one of these others? Let's take a look at this comparison chart. Okay, so the first thing you might want to do is store custom data values. And you can do that in any of these kinds of custom settings. Again, they're all available in automation. So You can choose whichever one you want. But once you start getting to some more complex situations, let's, for example, say you want to store more than one value in a single customization. Well, custom labels aren't going to cut it anymore. They can only store one value at a time. So you're going to need to use either a custom setting, a custom object, or custom metadata. Similarly, once you get into more complex field types, like let's say you want a pick list on this customization, well, now you're going to be narrowed down to just a custom object or custom metadata. And between these two, custom metadata has two distinct advantages. The first is that it can look up to other custom metadata type. There's no other object in Salesforce that can link different custom metadatas together. And secondly, what I think is really one of the best things about custom metadata is that the data records themselves are deployable. And what that means is if you've ever been in a situation where you're working in a sandbox and you've created a really cool customization and you want to transfer it over to your production environment, but when you get there, like if you were doing a custom label or a custom setting, you're going to have to update all of the values in that to match your production environment. Well, with custom metadata, you can actually transfer the values in addition to the configuration. So that can save you time when you're doing deployments, and it's a pretty cool feature. However, everything has its limitations, and custom metadata is no exception. So unfortunately, custom metadata is not editable via Apex. So if for some reason your developers really need to access a customization using Apex, you're going to have to go with one of these other customization types. So what are some actual use cases why you might use custom metadata? Well, the first and probably the most common is a mapping, where you're taking one value and then you're assigning a second value to it so that you're mapping those together. And we'll take a look at a use case of that in a minute. The second is to set up some business rules. So explaining what should happen during automation according to your business rules. And this is another use case that we'll see demoed later in my presentation. You can create lists of master data. So for example, the various tax rates in different states, you can create a list of those in custom metadata, and then you can deploy them to various orgs so that you can share that single list of data and keep it all together in one place. Similarly, you can create lists of approved donors or approved vendors and then share those between orgs, and you only have to update it in one place. And finally, one thing you might do is you can even store secret information like API keys, things that only admins should have access to. And then you can have your users will see that it's the custom metadata. They'll see what the field is, but they won't see the value of that API key. So let's move on now to look at some specific use cases about how a nonprofit might use custom metadata types. And to this, we're going to actually go ahead and set some things up in a Salesforce demo org. So the first use case I would like to look at are membership dues. This comes straight from what we do at my org, and that is that we want, if a donor is choosing a specific donor level, we want the membership dues to be mapped to that level. So we're going to use two fields, member level, and then we're going to map a dues amount to that member level. And this is so when we're doing data entry in Salesforce, we don't have to set the specific amount and remember, oh, how much is an individual membership worth? Oh, it's $50. We're going to use custom metadata to map those values. So let's go ahead and swap over to our demo org. We're going to type into the quick find custom metadata. It's going to bring up custom metadata types. And I'm going to want to create a new custom metadata type. So this is very much like creating a new custom object. It's going to ask you, what do you want to call this? And we're going to call this membership dues mapping. Put in the plural label. Mappings, just like you would for a custom object. Put in a quick description. Just so future you will thank you when you don't remember exactly why you created this, to have that there. We're going to leave the visibility as is and click Save. So now we have a brand new custom metadata type. And there's a few things to note here on the screen. One is there's two sections down here. Custom fields is where we're going to be heading next, because we want to define what are the fields on this custom metadata, the same way you would on a custom object. There's some standard fields, but what we want to add are those two fields that we're going to use to map our memberships. So we're going to create a new field. It's going to be a pick list field. And this is going to be our member level. And I'm going to enter values that match the values in my org. So we have individual, family, contributor, sustainer, and then I should have introed this before, but my demo org is for the Otter Appreciation Society, a nonprofit for those of us who love otters. So our final membership level is Otter Hero. And then I'm going to click Next. Just like you would for a custom object, this should all be pretty familiar. We're going to save that to the layout. And then I'm going to click Save and New, because I want to add a second custom field, which is going to be a text field. And in this, we're going to put the dues amount. And I chose text. You could choose number here, but you'll notice there wasn't an option for currency. But when you translate this into, actually, I'm going to change that and go back and select number. When we translate this into the opportunity, we'll translate it to a currency field. So now I have my two fields that I'm going to use. And now, what's special about custom metadata and what's a little bit different than a custom object is we're going to go here to this button that says Manage Membership Due Mappings. And what this is going to do is allow us to create actual records of custom metadata that are going to do the magic of doing that mapping. So we're going to create a new one, and we're going to start with our individual level. And we're going to set the member level. In this case, we're going to start individual, and then I'm going to put in the dues amount for that level. So now we have a dues mapping that maps $50 dues amount to that member level. What's a little bit annoying is in order to add multiple dues mappings, we're going to have to go back and forth between this page and that previous page. You'll notice there's no little link back. That's something hopefully they'll fix in a future release. But okay, so let's go ahead and create mappings for the remaining membership levels. We can click Save and New. This one will be contributor level. Do one for our sustainer level. And finally, our Otter Hero level. So now if we go back and look at that custom metadata type, we're going to find the membership dues mapping. And we click on manage, we're going to see all of the membership mappings that we just set up. And just to show here.
Hey, Sarah, before you continue, can you zoom in a little bit? Folks
Sure.
are having trouble seeing your what you're typing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just going to create a new view right quickly so that we can see here. These are now our records in the custom metadata types. So the custom metadata type that I set up has 2 custom fields that are holding information to map what the member level, the contributor level, is going to have $100 mapped to it. Family, $75. Individual, $50. And what's cool about this is, let's say at my organization, we decide to change one of these levels. We're going to say, oh, contributor level now starts at 150. I can just go into that record and go ahead and update this value here. And now, wherever this is referenced in my Salesforce instance, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is now going to update to 150. I don't have to remember all the places it's referenced. I just have to remember this one place is where I've set that value. So that's our first use case, setting up membership dues mappings. Now let's take another look at a slightly more complicated use case, which is going to be doing accounting assignments. So many nonprofits, when they receive income, they want to know which account to put that into, and we're going to use custom metadata type to help us with that. So we're going to assign the funds for incoming donations based on a combination of fields: the record type of the opportunity, the specific type of the opportunity, if there's a designated fund on that opportunity, and what % we want to allocate to the specific fund that we're doing. So let's go back to our custom metadata types. And I've already set this one up so we can, to save a little bit of time, but let's take a look at it. So here we have what I'm calling a general accounting unit allocation. And GAU allocations are a special object that come with the Nonprofit Success Pack. So if you haven't used this before, I highly recommend looking into it. There's Trailhead modules on how to use those. But so in this case, I've already set up some custom metadata that has a number of fields that are going to take, like I said, the opportunity record type, the type of opportunity, any special designation, and the %. And then it's going to map those to a GAU. And now I have 2 versions of identifying that GAU here, both the name and then the specific ID. And we'll take a look at that, why we did that when we get to the automation section. But for now, let's look at a few of the records for these this custom metadata type. So you'll notice here we have our 2 types of membership that if it's a membership record type, it could either be contributing or basic. And depending on which one of those it is, it's going to either map to the member dues general accounting unit or a special contributing membership general accounting unit. Similarly, for donations, we see that there's several different options here. So you can have a record type that's a donation, but then you might have a more specific type that's scholarship, which is going to map to the restricted funds general accounting unit. Or our fund appeal type donation is going to map to the general appeals general accounting unit. And then we have some specific designated funds here. And what I'm going to do is just an example of when let's say our Auto Appreciation Society is starting 2 new projects, and they want to create new mappings to these new general accounting units. So we're going to add two mappings. One is for the kelp reforestation. And this general accounting unit is going to be the kelp reforestation project. I'm going to have to go look up my general accounting units here in the Auto Appreciation Society demo org. And I'm going to click on that kelp reforestation project. And I'm going to grab the ID, the record ID from the URL, and put that here so that we know that we're going to the specific one there. And because we have two special projects that we're setting up, a kelp reforestation project and a sea urchin farming project, when a donation comes in for special projects, we're going to want to divide it between these two general accounting units. So I'm going to set the percentage for 50, and we'll see how that works in the automation in a bit. So again, this is a donation record type, and the opportunity type is going to be special projects. I'm going to create a second one now for our second special project. And again, if I go back to my general accounting units here, I'm going to look up the urchin farming project, grab its ID, and we're going to assign 50% of an incoming donation with a special projects opportunity type to 50% is going to go to urchin farming and 50% is going to go to the kelp reforestation project. Now, a special note, this GAU name, we want to make sure that that's matching exactly to the name that you have set up in your general accounting unit, because we're going to see later in the automation, we're going to use that to look up the general accounting unit. So we want to make sure that those match exactly. So we're going to go ahead and save that. Great. So now we have our GAU allocation mappings all set up. Open up this records, and we can see as opportunities come in, according to the record type, the designation, it's going to map to one of these GAUs, and it's going to assign the amount according to this percentage. So now that we've set up our custom metadata types, for both use cases, let's talk about how we're actually going to use these and automate them to add business logic to our automations. So we're going to jump back to the membership dues, and we're going to use Process Builder, and we're going to set a field value using custom metadata type in a formula on the opportunity. So let's open up a new contact record. And I'm going to choose contact here. And they're not yet a member. Let's say they want to join. We're going to create a membership using a pre-existing quick action a custom quick action. And they want to just join at the individual level. We're going to save that. It's going to create an opportunity. But if we go to that opportunity, we can see that the amount is 0 because we haven't set up any automation yet to access that membership dues custom metadata. So it doesn't know, it's not looking to the metadata yet to figure out how much the amount should be. And one of the things I want to mention is that, like many things in Salesforce, there are so many different ways to achieve the same goals. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways that we can use automation, either via Process Builder and formulas or Flow, to sort of achieve the same goal with these mappings. So let's take a look really quickly at Process Builder here. I have one open for whenever an opportunity is created and it's a membership record type, some things are going to happen. And one of those is we want to update the amount. And I've set it up here so that it's going to update the amount based off of a formula that is on the opportunity itself. If we go back to that opportunity, we can see here, there's a formula called member dues, but right now it's currently set to 0 because it's not accessing that custom metadata type. So we have to go update this formula that will then populate the amount using Process Builder. So let's look at the formula here. We're going to click into member dues formula, and we're going to edit it. And I've set this up as a case formula. And you could very easily put in the values that you wanted. You could hard code the values that you match up with our member levels the same way we did with the custom metadata types. But let's say I'm referencing this in multiple places in Salesforce, not just this one formula. I don't want to have to remember all the places I've hard coded this. I want to be able to have one place to go, custom metadata, to update these values and then reference them in the formula. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a field here. We have access to all our custom metadata in the field formula builder. And I'm going to go down to that membership dues mapping we created. I'm going to select the first level is going to be individual. And then I'm going to select the dues amount that we set. And I'm going to insert that. So now, when the member level pick list, that's what this is referencing here, the member level pick list is equal to individual, it's going to pull that dues amount that matches the individual custom metadata value. So let's go ahead and populate the rest of these. In this case, we're going family, insert the dues amount. Custom metadata. Now we're at the contributor level, inserting the dues amount. Oops, scrolled right past it. Membership dues mapping for the sustainer level. And finally, our auto hero level. And then this final 0 is just in case there isn't a member level chosen, it'll have a 0. So we're going to click Save here on this formula. And now, if we go back and create a new membership, we'll just delete this old one, get it out of the way. Let's say she actually decided she wants to join at a higher level. We're going to click Contributor. Automation running in the background there. Hop over to this opportunity. And we can see now that, first of all, this member dues formula is now calculating based on the value in our custom metadata type. So if we go back to that mapping, membership dues mapping, and we look at our records, we can see that the contributor level is 150. Member dues, 150, and then our process builder took this members due amount that was calculated using custom metadata types and populated it into our amount. So that's one way to do the mapping. But let's look at a slightly more complicated version, which is our accounting assignments. And for this, we're going to need to use flow, because what we want to do is use multiple criteria to find a particular custom metadata type record, and then use that custom metadata type record to assign the fund to the opportunity. So I'm going to hop right over to my flow builder. We're going to open up this pre-built flow. And what's happening here is this is one of the new record trigger flows. And anytime a record is created, after the record is saved, this flow is going to run when it's for opportunities. So this is similar, if you haven't had a chance to play with them yet, it's very similar to a process builder that when an opportunity is created, after the record is saved, this flow will trigger. But let's see what this flow is doing. So the first thing I'm going to do in the flow is after an opportunity is created, I'm going to look up our GAU allocation mapping from the custom metadata. And I'm going to find that record by matching. So I've set it to say, get records of our allocation mapping type. When you're populating this field, you'll notice that custom metadata types have the suffix, instead of having an __C, they're going to have MDT for metadata type. So that's going to help you identify the object that you're looking for. Just to show you what this looks like, when you're searching all your objects, it's going to show up just like any other object would. So I'm not going to scroll because there's a lot of objects in here, but if we type in the name of that object, it's going to go ahead and show up right there. So once we've chosen that that's the object we want, we're going to find a specific mapping based on the fields that we set on the custom metadata type. So we're going to look in the opportunity record type, and we're going to match that to the record type of the record that started this flow. So this special record variable is for record triggered flows. This refers to the opportunity that started the flow. It's going to go to that opportunity. It's going to look at the record type ID, like which record type it is, and then it's going to take the name, and it's going to look for one of our GAU allocation mapping records that has the same record type. Similarly, we're going to look at the type that's going to match the opportunity type, and if there's a designation, we want that to match the opportunity designation. So again, what we're doing is if we go back to our custom metadata types, we're going to go from the opportunity that triggers the flow. We're going to look up the record type, the type, any designation, and then it's going to find the record. So this whole line here, this whole contributing membership record, it's going to find the record that matches those specifics. We're going to store that record, just the first record that we find, and we're going to store all the fields because the next step of the flow is to find the general accounting unit that's associated with that custom metadata type mapping. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to look into that mapping record that we found, and we're going to find the GAU, the name field from that record, and we want to find the general accounting unit where the name matches the name. So what we're doing here is using that custom metadata type object as an intermediary between the opportunity and the general accounting unit to find the one that we have said maps to this type of opportunity. Once we found our general accounting unit, we can go ahead and set up a variable that we want to create the allocation with. So we're going to create a single GAU allocation, and we have to set three things. We have to set what opportunity it relates to. We have to set what accounting unit it relates to, and this is the accounting unit that we just found using that get records element. And then we want to set the percentage of the amount to assign to this GAU allocation. And again, we're going to use that information from the custom metadata type here. This is the percentage that we've set. So once we've assigned those, we can create that allocation, and it's going to automatically add an allocation to the opportunities. So I'm going to go ahead and save this flow. We're going to activate it. And now if we go back to our demo contact. This time she wants to make a donation. And we're going to set it to, she wants to make a designated donation of $100, and she wants to make it to the River Otter Fund. So now what that flow is going to do is it's going to go look in custom metadata, see if it finds a record that matches the record type and the designation. And if so, it's going to create this allocation here. And it's allocated 100% based off of, if we see here, the River Otter Fund is 100%. It's allocated 100% of the value from that opportunity to that fund. So that's great if we want to just have a one-to-one allocations to the various general accounting units that we have. But remember that case where we have the special projects that we want to have allocated to the two different funds. We're going to have to make this a little more complicated. So I'm going to go ahead and deactivate this and hop into our multiple GAU allocations. And this just adds one very small wrinkle where it's very similar, starts off the same way of when an opportunity is created and after the record is saved, we're going to start by finding the custom metadata type mapping. And then we're going to check if the percent field on that record, the custom metadata type record we found, is equal to 100. And if it is, this is the same process as we had before. However, if it's not equal to 100, if it's less than 100, we're going to go ahead and find all the other custom metadata type records that also match the same designation. Because if it's less than 100, that sort of implies that we have more than one defined. So again, we're using the same lookup filters as before to find the records. And this time we're just adding that the percent is less than 100. And we're going to store all the records that we find in a collection variable. Because what we're going to do is instead of just creating one allocation, we're going to create allocations for each of the mappings that we find by looping through all of the mappings we find. We're going to loop through to create a variable for this current iteration. So the first one we're going to loop through, we're going to create an allocation for the first custom metadata type record. These are all the same assignments that we made for the single case, but instead of using the single record we found, we're just using the current record. We're then going to add that single record to a collection variable that will update at the end. So we're going to add the current iteration loop to the collection, and we're going to update that at the end of the loop. And then we're going to go back to the beginning, and if there's another allocation to make, we'll do it again. And we'll keep repeating this until we've made all of the allocations that match the ones that we found. And at the end, we're going to create that collection. So I'm going to go ahead, save this flow, and activate it. And we can see this at work here. If we create a donation, and this time we're wanting it to go to special projects. Or let's say we're going to give $200 to special projects. And remember, we had those two special project custom metadata records. So it's going to split this $100 between them, or $200 between them. So it's going to be $100 each. So now if we look at this opportunity, we can see we have two allocations, and 50% of the opportunity has been allocated to each, giving $100 to each. Now let's say we don't want these projects to be split evenly. We can go back to our custom metadata type records for the allocations. And let's say we want the kelp reforestation. We only want that to receive 25% of a special projects donation. And we want the urchin farming special projects to receive 75%. Let's get this back to our flows. So now, if we look here at our allocation mapping, see, we've updated it to be 25% and 75%. So if we create yet another donation, which is going to be a major donor in no time to special projects. This time, let's do $100. We can see now that our percentages have changed here. So that's a very easy way to set up how much you're allocating to each of these funds. One quick note, you'll remember that when we were filling out these custom metadata type records, we had both the name and the ID. That is because for our allocations in the multiple allocation scenario, we're going to want to actually use the ID specifically, since the name, we don't want to add a get records the way that we did here for getting the general accounting unit. We don't want to add a get records inside the loop. So we're using the ID directly as opposed to searching for it. So that's just a little small note, but.
Sarah?
Yeah.
We're about 45 minutes past the hour.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to take some questions now?
Yep. I was just going to say the last little bit here about deploying custom metadata types. As we mentioned, you can deploy both the type and the records. And just a little hint, if you're creating a change set, you want to find both the metadata type as the component type. And then if you want to do specific records, it's going to be under the name of that. So, and with that, we're at questions.
Okay, awesome. You did an amazing job, and I have
Thanks.
Plenty of questions here for you. So one of the questions that was asked was, can you mass import metadata records from data loader or something like that, especially if you have a lot of mappings?
Yes, you can. Similar to importing records for custom objects, in data loader, you can access that metadata type as if you would a custom object.
Okay. The next question is, what is the benefit of using custom metadata over dependent pick lists in the first use case?
So I think if I understand, in a dependent pick list, you would say, okay, I'm going to set the member level at individual, and then you can pick the dues amount from a second dependent pick list. I think that's another way you could do that. Like I said before, there's a lot of different ways to solve the same problems in Salesforce usually. I think it's a slight advantage in that you can enter the value sort of more directly than you could in a pick list. And you would have to convert that pick list into currency as well. But honestly, for me, it comes back to the deployability of custom metadata types. Rather than having to like repopulate that when I moved it over, you could populate the records. But I think dependent pick lists would be a perfectly valid way to go.
And this question just came in. Can I use permission sets to give a specific non-admin user or profile access to custom metadata types?
That's a really good question. honestly not sure. I think you need to have customized application in order to access custom metadata types. But I would have to do some research and get back to you on that. Sorry.
So how do you apply that custom metadata type mapping to your objects/fields?
So it's mostly done on the back end, like I was showing, either through a formula or a process builder or flow. These aren't really an object that you can access the same way you can on the front end. So like in my app, there's no way that I can look at the custom metadata types here. There's sort of no permission to create a tab or send them. You can only see them as records in setup here. And then you use, like the example that we had with Process Builder and the formula on the opportunity to access this information onto the objects or using Flow. But there's no equivalent really to list views on the front end the same way like you would have for accounts. There's no equivalent to this for custom metadata types. I don't know if that answers the question, but.
I think you answered it the best way that you possibly could.
Right.
I do have a question that came in twice. In the first use case, why hard code the names of membership level, for example, individual, in the formula? Would it also make sense to reference the custom metadata level in case that name was also changed in the future?
Yeah, that's a great option. So if we go back to that formula, you would just have to make sure that the names in your pick list. So in this case, we're looking at the member level pick list here. Let's go look at that really quick. You just have to make sure that these values here match the values that you have set up in your custom metadata records. So if you were changing them, you'd have to change them both in the pick list and the custom metadata type, but I think that's a great idea.
We do have a little, maybe 10 minutes left before Demo Jam. Is it possible you could show in more detail how you set the different percentages in the allocation flow?
Sure, yeah. Let's see, we want this one. So what's really going on here is once we get to the point where we know we have more than one custom metadata type mapping, and this is a little particular because it all relies on the fact that the percentages are set here in the custom metadata type, where I'm specifying this is less than 100. So presumably that means you want another type that is that matches that. You wouldn't necessarily have to have them be the same opportunity record type, but once we know that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this collection, and then when I'm looping through, I'm looking at the very particular allocation and setting the percentage based on its custom metadata type. So in this particular case, we have two, right? We have the kelp reforestation project that has a percentage of 25, and then the urchin farming, which has a percentage of 75. So in my flow, when I do this lookup, and you can't, it's hard to debug record triggered flows, so I can't show you exactly what's happening, but when we're doing this lookup, we're looking for the record type, the designation, the percent. We're gonna find two records. One is that kelp forestation record, and the second is the urchin farming record. So we're gonna add those two records into a collection variable, and that's a special flow variable. And then we're gonna loop through the collection. So let's say we're going through the first time, and the record that we're dealing with is the kelp reforestation record. So we're going to set the opportunity equal to the record, and then we're going to look to that kelp reforestation custom metadata type record. So that's this one. We're going to look to this record, and we're going to say, okay, what's the GAU associated with that record? It's the kelp reforestation project. And what's the percentage associated with this record? 25%. And we're going to use those two values to assign to this sort of this allocation variable. We're going to use those to assign the specific percentage that we specified in the custom metadata. We then add the current variable that we're working with to a new collection, which is this allocations to recreate. So the GAU allocation variable that we just made those assignments to, we're adding it to this collection. So it's sort of storing a copy of that to say, okay, later I'm going to use that copy to update, to create some new records. And then we're going to go back and do the same thing again, but this time we're looking at the urchin farming metadata record type. So this time it's going to find, okay, the second metadata record type that I found was this urchin farming, and it's going to say, okay, what's the GAU associated with that? It's the urchin farming project with this ID. And what's the percentage associated with that? 75% in this case. And it's going to use those values to create a second GAU allocation variable that we're adding then to the collection. So it's sort of saying these two placeholders now, okay, we have one that represents the kelp reforestation allocation and one that represents the urchin farming allocation. And when we, at the end of our loop, create those records, it's going to create one for each of those allocations based on the information that was in the custom metadata type records. I hope that clears it up a little bit. I can always offline later walk some people through like a debug log to show exactly what's happening, but I don't want to get into that right now. So anything else?
Great. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
That was amazing and super brave.
Yeah. Feel free to follow up with me either through this platform or you can find me on Twitter at Spilzer. I love geeking out about this stuff, obviously, so happy to answer more questions later.
I always think it's incredible when people are building on the go like that during a presentation. So that was amazing. So I just want to say thank you everyone for attending and thank you again to our incredible sponsors. So please, return to the reception area. There's some time before the demo jam to do some the collaboration conversations and the speed networking. But yeah, the demo jam is at the top of the hour and we will hopefully see you there. Thank you, Sarah.
Great. Thanks, everybody.